In today's video, I'm going to take you on location to give you the ultimate guide to forest photography. And if you absorb these tips that I'm going to give you, I can absolutely guarantee that you will become better at photographing trees.
Guarantee, not remotely guaranteed in any way.
But before we get into that, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who purchased a pre-order of my new book, Stories Within Stories. I've just got the contract proofs signed, and this is the content proof. It's kind of like a manuscript of the full book, and we will be taking receipt of all the printed books at the end of May, and then we'll start shipping those out. So if you were thinking of getting a copy of Stories Within Stories while it's on pre-order, it will never cost less than it costs right now. I'll put a link in the description. All right, now prepare yourself for some absolutely delicious eye candy. Not me, obviously, the pictures you're about to see. So in today's video, I'm going to teach you how I photograph trees. You're actually going to learn quite a bit in this video. And what I thought was, rather than drive 6 hours to go somewhere, I thought, I've got a few acres, I might as well just walk around my own property and see what we can find, see if there's any interesting trees. So we're going to go for a little mini hike on our little acreage and see what we can find.
Well, we found forest food.
What's that, love?
Chocolate chips.
No, that is, yeah, it's chocolate chips. Yeah, I knew you wouldn't. You're all mouth and no trousers. So you see, this poo here, this deer poo, see how it's a bit elongated? That means that the deer was running. Probably being chased by a coyote or a cougar or something. We might find some coyote scat somewhere.
I don't think this is our property here.
No, I'm sure we're all right. That's kind of interesting though. Kind of like that one. Might come back to that.
To be honest, I had no clue where we were. But anyway, let me explain how to photograph trees and forests in your landscape photography.
All right, so my first tip, and it's a pretty obvious one to be honest with you, is to try and find a tree with some character. A gnarly tree with some interesting shapes and forms. That's really going to engage your audience a lot more than just a straight stick.
So what makes an interesting tree form? Well, look for twisted branches or creeping roots, knots, burls, or even faces.
And if it's got colour, even better, but I'm always on the lookout for interesting trees, and I catalogue them mentally. If you wanted to, you could make a notebook or a text document, GPS coordinates, remind yourself of where they all are. But if you spend a bit of time walking through the forest, cataloguing all the most interesting trees, you can always be ready to go back there when the conditions are right. And that one is probably the most interesting one I've seen today. So I'm just going to walk around and see if I can find an angle that frames it nicely. It's quite good from this angle. So then my next tip is to try and...
Can I help you? What are you doing on my land?
Oh, sorry, I thought I was on mine. I didn't realise I'd gone onto yours. Didn't mean to trespass. I was just hoping to get a shot of that nice tree there.
Oh.
Yeah, so you don't mind if I record a tutorial then?
No, I suppose so. I'll just have to get my phone out, won't I?
What are you doing?
No, I'm recording you. Recording that.
Well, don't you think that's a bit weird?
It's not really as weird as you recording yourself, is it?
Well, you got a point, actually. Anyway, I'm Gavin. This is Amanda. What's your name?
Phil.
Phil what?
McCavity. It's not funny.
No. No, definitely. I'm not laughing. Anyway, right, I'm going to get on with this tutorial. I guess you're just filming it then. Now, another really useful tip is, if you can, depends where your tree is, but if you can, try to shoot up slope. And by that, what I mean is, if your interesting tree has a slope or a hill or a mountain behind it, then you won't have to worry too much about all that open canopy at the top of the frame. It'll be filled with something darker than the tree, and that'll make the tree really pop against that dark background rather than an open white sky or blue sky, which you really do not want. Now, if you do suffer a blue sky day, don't worry, all is not lost. Because what you could do is fill that sky with the stars or the Milky Way. Now, it's obviously not going to work in a forest like this, but let's say you're on some mountainside and there's a lone tree that's just set off against an empty background. Just wait until it gets dark and fill that empty background with the stars. This works really well if you've got a very, very interesting tree, but there's nothing around it. It's just a lone figure on a hillside. And with that backdrop of the galaxy, it's really going to pop. Now, this is another obvious one, and it doesn't just apply to tree photography, but that is find a reflection. I mean, you can do this with any kind of landscape photography. A little bit of a reflexion going on here. But if you can find a reflection, especially if you've got a colourful tree, you're going to double the amount of colour in your frame. And if that tree's also a nice shape, you're going to get an absolutely gorgeous shot with a reflexion.
I also recommend that you experiment with different aspect ratios and crops to remove ugly gaps of sky, both in the top and in the bottom of the frame.
So here's a good compositional tip. Are you going to be long? So a compositional tip that I can give to you is try not to do everything as a central shot. Try and offset your tree to one side of the frame, especially if it's just one single tree. Now, it's different if you've got a group of trees. You're going to have to figure out how to arrange them. But if you've got one main tree that's the main subject of your shot, by all means, take that obvious composition where it's slap bang in the middle. It usually always works. But if you can, just push it off to one side, offset the frame, and it'll just be that little bit less obvious and a bit more interesting, especially if the backdrop is also really interesting and has other features to look at. Well, this is quite an interesting tree up here. I don't know if I'll get a shot of it, but have a look at this business.
Phil McCavity had some pretty nice trees on his property, and I could see why he was keen to tidy things up just a little bit.
Oh, look at that one. Now that is gnarly. Now, if you're struggling to find gnarly trees that have got loads of character and really interesting forms, then you're kind of stuck with trees that are boring sticks. But if you wait till autumn, all of a sudden that boring scene of just straight sticks turns into a beautiful, colourful scene. So now your composition is more about colour and less about form. And if you can find a nice grouping of really colourful trees in the autumn, especially with a reflection, you might be able to get shots like this.
I shot these images using the 65:24 aspect ratio, which really helps to simplify the compositions.
I think I probably prefer it from the other side, but definitely you should always look at an interesting tree from 360 and try and find the best angle. Now, one of the things that I often try to do with my tree photography is to use framing. Now, this could be a partial frame. You could use another tree in the foreground just to kind of offset a distant tree, or if you're lucky, you might be able to get almost a full circle of a frame, like a hole into a forest scene. Framing is always going to give you a far more interesting shot. If you can put something in your foreground or off to the sides of an already interesting tree, then you're going to be onto an absolute killer shot. A really effective tip I can give you that I don't usually hear other photographers talk about when it comes to forest photography and trees is to use pathways. Like if you can feature a trail in your shot or a pathway that takes the viewer on a journey through the forest, it's always a really enticing concept. People want to stare at those types of pictures for hours, and I love taking those kinds of shots. So whether the path or trail is off to one side or whether it's central, either way, if you can feature a path in your composition, it's going to be really engaging to the viewers, and you'll probably enjoy shooting it more as well. And then my final tip is a bit... What's happening here?
I was invited on.
Just a bit of hammock time.
Hammock time.
Do 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 do.
Well, actually, that's good. That brings me on to my last point, and that is, I know this is a bit of a cop-out because everyone says this, but if you can get a forest like this with a few gnarly trees on a foggy day, you're going to get absolutely killer shots. And so it's good that we've made friends, because if it's foggy, can I come back?
Definitely.
Yeah?
Yeah, why not?
Oh, brilliant.
Why not?
If you don't get fog, but you've got a really heavy rainy day, if you do a long exposure, that rain can actually look a lot like fog. It's not quite as good, but it'll really help to separate the interesting trees from an otherwise complicated background like this. I mean, you've got that chainsaw, maybe you could do a little bit of pruning.
Yeah, give us a hand with the logs up the hill afterwards, would you?
I need some firewood, yeah.
All right.
I'm good for
That's
that.
the deal.
So anyway, we've got a solar eclipse to go and shoot, so
All right.
I don't think I'll bother shooting anything today, you know, with all the noise and interruptions.
Yeah.
So but thanks for letting us trespass.
Thanks, Phil.
But seriously though, Phil, thanks for that. I really appreciate that.
Welcome, Gavin.
All right, mate.
Take care, Amanda.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. What's that? Where are you going?
Oh, it's my tiny house.
You live in there?
Oh, yes. Pod life.
All right. Bye then.
So here's a better look at those images. Please give it the old thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, don't forget to tickle my bell, and I'll see you in the next one.
Name's Phil.
Phil what?
Phil McCracken.
McCavity. Phil what?
It's wrong way around.